Against the glittering skyline of New York City stood the towering headquarters of Reed Tech, a monument to innovation and success. At its helm was Alexander Reed, a man of precision, control, and undeniable brilliance. At just 34, Alexander had turned a struggling startup into one of the most influential tech companies in the world. But now, seated behind his sleek mahogany desk in his top floor office, Alexander was faced with a challenge that even his sharpest algorithms couldn't solve. The ultimatum had been clear: marry within 6 months or risk losing the CEO position he had built his life around. The board had justified it as a way to stabilize the company's image and align with their conservative investors, but to Alexander, it felt like corporate coercion. Enter Emma Carter, a 27-year-old financial consultant with a reputation for transforming struggling businesses into thriving successes. Ambitious, intelligent, and fiercely independent, Emma had spent years building her consultancy from the ground up. She had no interest in distractions or relationships, until a very unconventional proposal landed in her lap. Alexander and Emma's worlds collided in a calculated arrangement, a marriage of convenience. It was supposed to be simple: no emotions, no complications, just a contract. But as their lives intertwined and cracks formed in their carefully constructed walls, neither of them could predict the impact of what had started as a business deal. Would logic and control be enough to keep their hearts in check? Or would the terms of their contract become irrelevant in the face of something neither of them had planned for? Alexander Reed, a CEO known for his unshakable calm and calculated demeanor, rarely let anything disrupt his work. But the ultimatum from the board of directors had placed him in an unexpected situation. 6 months to marry. A command he couldn't evade. After weighing his options, Alexander made a decision. This would be a marriage of convenience. No emotions, no messy entanglements, just a calculated arrangement for mutual benefit. His team scoured for suitable candidates, and among them, Emma Carter's profile stood out above the rest. Emma, a brilliant financial consultant, had built her boutique consultancy firm from scratch. At 27, she was one of the youngest to earn respect in her field, but her journey to success had been anything but easy. Emma knew her worth and wasn't afraid to protect it. So when Alexander's proposal, ambitious and unconventional, landed on her desk, she couldn't ignore the opportunity. Their first meeting took place at an exclusive restaurant in Midtown. Alexander, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, sat across from Emma, whose sharp professionalism was matched by her elegant attire. "Miss Carter," he began, his tone measured and precise, "I'm here to propose an arrangement, a 2-year marriage contract. No emotions, strictly for mutual benefit." Emma didn't flinch, meeting his gaze steadily. "And the terms?" Alexander outlined them in detail. Access to Reed Tech's vast network, financial independence, and full support for Emma's business ventures. In return, she would play the role of his perfect wife at corporate events and maintain the appearance of being part of his life publicly. After a long pause, Emma offered a faint smile. "I have my own conditions." They negotiated like 2 seasoned business professionals, emotions kept at bay. At last, they reached an agreement. Emma agreed, not for love, not for romance, but for the immense opportunity this arrangement presented for her career. A contract was signed, but neither of them realized that this was only the beginning of complications they couldn't foresee. It all started out fairly straightforward. Alexander and Emma followed the terms of their contract to the letter, keeping their personal lives separate and appearing together only when necessary for corporate events. Product launches, fundraising galas, and board meetings went off without a hitch. Emma quickly adapted to her role as Alexander's wife in the public eye, earning admiration for her confidence and sharp wit. Alexander, meanwhile, couldn't help but notice how Emma always stood her ground, never allowing herself to be overshadowed. But small moments began to chip away at the emotional walls they had built. At one company dinner, Alexander caught Emma smiling, a genuine, unguarded smile, while speaking with a major partner. That smile, fleeting as it was, left an inexplicable impression on him, making him realize he was noticing her in ways he never intended. He found himself wondering about her thoughts, her laughter, and even her quiet moments when she wasn't trying to impress anyone. Emma was no exception. During a joint press interview, Alexander defended her skills and talent against thinly veiled questions about her credibility. The warmth that rose in her chest was undeniable, though she tried to ignore it. The turning point came during a dance lesson. Preparing for an upcoming gala, they needed to perfect their first dance. In Alexander's sleek penthouse, furniture had been cleared to make room. Emma stood across from him, her shoulders tense as Alexander gently placed a hand on her waist. "Relax, Emma," Alexander said, his tone softer than she'd ever heard it. She swallowed hard, her pulse racing at the gentle weight of his hand on her waist. The air between them felt heavy, charged with something she didn't want to name. "I'm not used to this," she admitted, avoiding his gaze. "It's just a dance lesson," he replied, though his gray eyes locked onto hers as if searching for something deeper. But Emma's body didn't listen to reason. His hand on her waist made her nerves buzz, and the way his gaze lingered felt like it could see right through her. They continued the lesson, but each subtle touch and every glance that lingered too long created an atmosphere neither dared to name. From that point on, things only grew more complicated. Emma found herself thinking about Alexander more often, not because of the contract, but because of the moments of raw honesty they shared. As for Alexander, a man who prided himself on his control, he felt his composure slipping every time she entered the room. Though both tried to maintain their emotional distance, the cracks in their walls became more pronounced with every passing day. The emotional walls between Alexander and Emma were crumbling, but before either could address what was happening, an unexpected crisis struck. The news hit like a bomb. Emma Carter, Alexander Reed's contract wife, accused of corporate espionage. Major media outlets exploded with damning headlines, and social media buzzed with speculation. Emma stood frozen in her office, staring at the articles. They accused her of using her relationship with Alexander to carry out illegal actions targeting the company's largest competitor, Orion Tech. The allegations were based on leaked information, twisted and manipulated to paint her as the villain. Alexander entered the room, his face dark with fury. "Emma, have you seen this?" "Of course I have," she replied, her voice icy to mask the tremor in her hands. "Do you believe it?" "I know you didn't do this." His voice was low and firm as he stepped closer. "But the problem is, the board and the public don't care about the truth. They care about optics." "Joel, what now?" Emma asked, her anger bubbling to the surface. "Do you want me to sign divorce papers to protect the company?" Alexander's silence was deafening, and it made her chest tighten. "I just want to protect you," he finally said. "If this continues, your reputation, your career, everything you've worked so hard for will be destroyed." But Emma wasn't backing down. "I've worked too hard to let a fabricated scandal take me down," she said, her eyes blazing with determination. That night, Emma pored over the documents and data she'd gathered from her recent projects. A startling discovery emerged. The leaks had come from an internal source, and no one else but Veronica Reed, Alexander's mother, was behind it all. Emma confronted Alexander immediately. "It was your mother. She leaked the information and twisted it against me." Alexander froze, and then his face hardened. "If that's true, she didn't just betray you. She betrayed the company." The next morning, at an emergency board meeting, Emma and Alexander presented their evidence: encrypted emails, suspicious financial transactions, and documents tying Veronica to Orion Tech. Veronica, seated across the table, couldn't hide her shock as the board members began piecing together the truth. "Everything I did was for this company," she claimed defensively. "No," Alexander replied, his tone calm but cutting. "Everything you did was about control, and you almost destroyed this company because of it." Ultimately, the board forced Veronica to resign and relinquish her shares. The crisis was resolved, but at the cost of a painful confrontation between Alexander and his mother. As the meeting ended, Alexander turned to Emma. "I'm sorry for doubting you, even for a moment." Emma replied, her voice gentle but resolute. "We got through this together. This isn't just your company anymore. It's ours." They left the boardroom hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. The crisis had passed, but its echoes lingered in the minds of both Alexander and Emma. Veronica had left the company, but the cost was a painful fracture in the Reed family. After the final board meeting, Alexander and Emma returned to the penthouse. They sat quietly on the sofa, gazing out at the glittering lights of New York City through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "You fought for this company like it was your own," Alexander said, breaking the silence. "I can't begin to tell you how proud I am of you." Emma turned to him, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Because it's not just yours anymore," she replied. "It's ours, and I don't regret fighting for it." Alexander sighed, his gaze full of emotion. "I've spent my entire life trying to control everything, and then you came into my life and turned it all upside down." Emma let out a quiet laugh. "Didn't we have a contract for that?" Alexander stood, walking to his desk where he retrieved a familiar folder. Their marriage contract. He looked at Emma, his expression serious, then tore it into small pieces. "We don't need this anymore," he said. "That contract was just the beginning. What's keeping us together isn't on paper. It's what we've built together." Emma walked over to him, placing her hand over his. "So, what do we do next?" "We start over," Alexander replied. "No contract, no conditions, just us." In that moment, Emma felt like she was stepping into a new chapter. All the pressure, all the expectations, and all the conflicts seemed to fade away. They both looked ahead, no longer strangers in a business deal, but two people truly in love, ready to build a future together. As the city lights continued to sparkle outside, Alexander pulled Emma into his arms and whispered, "We've been through it all. From here on out, it's all about love." Emma smiled in return, "And for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid to love anymore." After the tension and turmoil of recent weeks, Alexander decided they needed time away from work. Without telling Emma, he planned a surprise trip to a secluded island paradise. One crisp morning, Alexander's car arrived to pick Emma up from her office. "Where are we going?" she asked, her eyes widening with curiosity as she saw him waiting with a mysterious smile. "Just a little surprise," Alexander replied, his eyes glinting with mischief. They arrived at a stunning beachfront resort, where gentle waves lapped at the pristine white sand. Alexander had planned everything, a private villa, candlelit dinners, and breathtaking views. But this was only the beginning. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Alexander led Emma to a quiet stretch of beach. Fairy lights twinkled along the shore, and fresh flowers were scattered across the sand, creating an almost magical atmosphere. "Alexander?" Emma said, her voice trembling slightly. "What is this? Why do I feel like you're hiding something from me?" Alexander took her hand and guided her to a small table set with a bottle of wine and light snacks. They sat under the starlit sky, talking and laughing, their guards completely down. As the moment felt just right, Alexander stood, moved in front of Emma, and dropped to one knee. "Emma Carter," he began, his voice steady and full of emotion. "From the moment you walked into my life, you turned everything upside down. I thought I only needed a contract, a simple arrangement, but you made me realize that love is real, even for someone like me." Emma's breath hitched, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't want to just be your partner in an agreement. I want to be your partner in life," Alexander continued. "Emma, will you marry me, not because of a contract, but because of love?" Emma broke into tears, nodding fervently. "Yes, Alexander. Yes, I will." They embraced as the fairy lights danced around them and the waves whispered softly against the shore. In that moment, the world faded away, leaving only the two of them. 1 month later, Alexander and Emma held a wedding filled with vibrant flowers at a beautiful garden by the sea. Everything was perfect. The radiant blooms, the gentle music, and the heartfelt blessings from their friends and family. As they exchanged their vows in front of everyone, there was no longer a contract binding them, only true love. Alexander and Emma's life after marriage was no longer filled with tense negotiations or strategic planning, but instead a peace neither of them had known before. Following their flower girl wedding by the sea, they moved into their new home, a cozy villa in the suburbs, where sunlight poured through every window. Emma continued her work in financial consulting, while Alexander led Reed Tech with the unwavering support of his wife. Their lives became even more complete when Emma shared the news that she was pregnant. Alexander, a man who once prided himself on controlling everything, suddenly found himself at a loss for words, overwhelmed by joy. He dove headfirst into learning how to be a father, from assembling a crib to researching the best diapers. When their daughter was born, they named her Lily, a name symbolizing purity and new beginnings. Watching Lily rest in Alexander's arms, Emma couldn't stop smiling. The once cold and composed Alexander was now a gentle, doting father who didn't hesitate to wake up in the middle of the night to rock Lily back to sleep or change her diapers. 2 years later, in their laughter-filled home, Emma sat on the couch watching Alexander play on the floor with Lily. The bright-eyed toddler giggled as Alexander pretended to be a playful monster, chasing her around. "You know," Emma teased, her voice laced with humor, "all of this started with a contract." Alexander chuckled, lifting Lily into his arms and sitting her on his lap. "Yes, but it's the best contract I've ever signed." Emma laughed heartily. "A contract so great that it turned into a family." Alexander turned to Emma, his gaze filled with love. "It wasn't the contract or the terms. You and Lily are everything I need. And I never thought my life could be this happy." Emma stood and joined them on the floor, wrapping her arms around Alexander and Lily. The three of them embraced in a warm hug, Lily's giggles blending seamlessly with her parents' joy. Outside the window, the golden glow of the setting sun bathed their home in warmth, as if nature itself celebrated their happiness. Alexander and Emma's story, which began as a cold, calculated contract, had blossomed into a family overflowing with love. It was proof that true love doesn't need conditions. It only needs sincerity and shared moments to grow.